to join in and then begin our evening. Okay, a very good evening once again, and welcome to both of you lovely people, Rahul and Meghna. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I'm super excited to begin this series of conversations with the two of you. So before I do that, I would like to take the opportunity of introducing both of you formally to all the people who are here in this Zenversations evening. So I'm going to introduce Meghna first, ladies first. So Meghna possesses a BSc Honours in Business Management from King's College London, UK, and a postgraduate diploma in Communications, Advertising and Marketing from the CAM Foundation, London, UK. Meghna returned to India after a brief work stint at CD Guru in the UK. Her mission was very clear: to fulfill her father, filmmaker Subhash Ghai's vision to build the best film school in the world. She was involved in every aspect of the setup and operations of Whistling Woods International since its inception. Meghna also spearheaded marketing and international distribution activities at Mukta Arts Limited in 2003. Tal, Pardes, Yadein are few of the prominent projects that she led. Thus, her industry connects commenced. In a span of 12 years, she has spearheaded the launch of 7 schools under the Whistling Woods umbrella. These schools run degree and diploma courses in filmmaking, acting, animation, fashion, music, visual communication design, and media and communication, accredited to the Tata the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, TISS. The Hollywood Reporter rated Whistling Woods International as one of the 10 best film schools in the world. Almost every establishment scouting for talent in the media and entertainment industry in India turns to Whistling Woods International and knows that Whistling Woods is the best place to go to get the best talent. Over time, Meghna realized the need to expand the indigenously crafted education model followed by WWI, that is Whistling Woods International, to other verticals. In 2013, Meghna was awarded with the prestigious honorary fellowship by UK's largest college, Bradford College, for her contribution to media education. Shaping students' careers, structuring the media and entertainment industry, and mentoring the workforce at Whistling Woods International are top priority for her. Meghna remains determined to make Whistling Woods International the thought leader for film and media education in the world. And we can see clearly that that is already happening. It gives me great pleasure and joy to also welcome Rahul Puri, Head of Academics at Whistling Woods International. Rahul Puri is the Head of Academics of India's finest film and communication and creative education institute, Whistling Woods International, and he is also the managing director of India's leading entertainment company, Mukta Arts Limited. A business graduate from King's College London, he started his career as an investment banker at UBS Warburg. Rahul Puri moved to Mumbai in 2002 and worked in the sector of corporate finance and strategy before he joined the Mukta Arts Limited to produce, distribute Indian films. Rahul is now involved in all aspects of the company, including financing, distribution, production, exhibitions, and marketing. He was keenly involved in the setup of Whistling Woods International and is now setting up and building out a chain of cinemas under the brand name Mukta A2 Cinemas. Did I get that right? It's A2. So, wow. Such an illustrious couple sitting here in front of me, and I don't know where to start because there's just so much I want to ask you, and there's so much that I want to talk to you about. But Rahul and Meghna, I'm going to start by asking you, maybe Meghna, you first, because I know for one thing that you are a practicing Buddhist, and you have said that in a number of your interviews before. What does the word Zen mean to you? Because we are celebrating this year as the year of Zen at 10. We are Zen about our 10 years achievement. What does it mean to you?
So first of all, thank you, Manjushri, for having us. It has really been my pleasure to see Atman Academy grow into this beautiful, beautiful lotus flower, I should say. And all your children, they're so talented. I still remember coming there. I think it was the 5th anniversary when I came. And, the talent that they displayed and the amazing, determination that they have, despite whatever difficulties they face. I think that is just so inspiring. And you're doing such meaningful work that, it's always such a pleasure to do anything as part of Atman Academy. So thank you very much for having us. And congratulations on the 10th.
Thank you.
So what does Zen really mean to me? When I wasn't practicing Buddhism, Zen would really mean to me peace, meditation, being in this really quiet place alone, right? But since I started practicing Buddhism, I realized that that's actually not what Zen means to me anymore. What being Zen means is actually being able to have the courage to be able to face the problems that we see in society. To be able to face the challenges that we have with a joyful heart, with a smile on our face. That is what Zen means to me now. So it's really changed my definition of what Zen means. And I think having courage, conviction, determination, and really going through life's problems and challenges with this smile on your face that, that this is my purpose, this is my mission, and I'm going to accomplish it. With that optimism is what Zen means to me.
Wow. Wow. That is profound. I mean, thank you, because I think I'm going to go back with another deep understanding of the term Zen. Rahul, what are the first 3 words that come to your mind when you hear the word Zen?
First of all, congratulations, Manjushri, as Meghna said, congratulations on 10 years. 3 words for me, I think when I think of the word Zen, I think of strength, I think of focus, and I think of balance. I think those are the 3 words that come to my mind. Strength, because I think Zen makes you very, very strong, as Meghna said, to follow your convictions. I think that's very important. Focus, because I think Zen gives you a lot of clarity to see where you're going and what you need to do. I think that's very important. And last but not least, balance. I think, lots of people tend to believe that Zen means all good things are happening to you, but it doesn't. It means that there are good things, bad things happening around you. And there's nothing you can do about that. And what Zen means is that you're able to find a balance. You're able to find a balance between those good and bad. And that keeps you on an even keel. And I think that, those are the 3 words that come to mind.
Wow. Wow.
This question wasn't discussed. Any of the questions weren't discussed. So it's like a
That's the Zenness of your marriage. I mean, that's the way. I think it's just like minds. You think alike, and that's what makes the situation so Zen. So amazing. And being a practicing classical musician, I tend to go into kya baat hai. Kya baat hai. I really feel this kya baat hai moment. Thank you. This has been a super Zen start to this session today, this Zenversations today. And for all of you who've joined us here, I want to also tell you a very special connect that we have with Meghna. Yes, of course, she was with us on our 5th foundation day. She was the chief guest for our event that evening. And of course, my connection with her dates back to a very long back, because I'm associated with Whistling Woods as a resource person, as a trainer for the faculty. But for me, a very close connect with Meghna is the fact that the first girl student of Atman Academy, who was celebrated when she took admission at Artans Academy, because we didn't have any girls till then in our school. It was like 4 months into school and we had only boys, only 4 boys. And then this girl came, believe me, we bought a cake and we celebrated, yay, pehli ladki aa gayi. So our first girl student has only recently in 2020 passed out from Wisting Woods after having completed her graduation program. So we are really, really happy that there's that connect as well. And believe me, I did not know she was taking admission in your college at all. I had no clue that she had, tried for it, and she got it on her own merit. And so that makes it even more precious. So that's our Meghna Connect, double connect. So Meghna, today, like I said, this entire Zen Sessions has been planned with the intention of getting children to listen to speakers who have made it big and have gone through their own grind. And our children need to hear these stories from a lot of our own people. So I'm going to start by asking you, going back, baby memories. What are some of your earliest memories when you were a little child? And can you just tell us about your beginnings?
So, my childhood was very different from what everybody may imagine it to be, right? So everybody thinks of me as Subhash Ghai's daughter, and my father is a very celebrated filmmaker. I understand that, and I have a lot of respect for that. But when I was growing up, in fact, when I was born, that is just the time when he had started seeing success as a director. So before I was born, it was all struggle, and my mom and him were barely able to feed the family because they had no money. My dad had to write scripts and sell them so that he would be able to get some money, because he trained to be an actor. So he wasn't really trained to be a director. He wanted to be an actor, and he struggled. He got very few roles. The roles that he did, those films wouldn't release. So full of struggles. And when I was born was when he made Curse. And in 1980, and Curse was released, and it completed a silver jubilee. But again, in those days, films didn't make the kind of money that they make today. Yeah, so the money was always never important for him. For my mom, it was always that he was able to do what he really was passionate about, which is make films. So I grew up in a very, very humble surrounding. My mom comes from a very humble family background. So does my dad. They are not connected to the films, and they brought me up like that. So when these talks of nepotism happen, for example, and I know that I'm looked at as a celebrity child, I just go back to my childhood, and I think not everybody can be labeled like that. I think all of us have had our unique journeys, and it's not fair, to be really labeled. So I think one of the things that I also faced was, so my parents always wanted me to be very humble and very down to earth. So they really kept me away from the industry and, from the schools that industry kids were going to. And I was sent to this little school in Bandra called Apostolic Carmel High School. And it was a convent. And over there, almost teachers and the kids would look down upon Hindi films. Yeah, so it was like something that we don't watch Hindi films. So I have, as I've grown up, as I was growing up, I was actually hiding my identity. I was trying not to tell people who I was.
Seriously?
Yeah, so by the time I was 10, 12, we had a small car, and a car and driver could drop me. So I would tell my mom that, please, can we tell Tambi Bhaiya to leave the car a little away from the school, so I'll walk to school. I don't want everybody to know I have a car. So I think that, it's so funny that kids feel like, unke paas itna hoga, this is how their childhood must have been. But I think all of us have had our own little journeys, and we've all come from different kind of learning experiences. So for me, that was very special, that I went to a school where, people didn't like me or didn't give me attention for being somebody's daughter. Some of them didn't even know who I was, right? They just liked me for who I was, or didn't like me. So I was a very different kid in school. I went through a lot of confidence issues. I had episodes where, the girls who were cooler, it would make me feel, really low about myself. And I used to cry at lunchtime. I've had all of that all kids, not all introverted kids especially may go through. So I've been through that. And it was only after my eighth standard, actually, when my life turned around, because I found a teacher. I found a teacher who really gave me so much self-confidence. She nurtured me. She was my maths and science teacher, but she nurtured me in a way that I started finding confidence in myself. And from a kid who I still remember, that 7th standard exam, there was a unit test in geography, and I had failed by half a mark. And I started crying. I didn't have the confidence to go to the teacher. I started crying, and the entire class stood up for me. And they said, "You cannot, teacher, you cannot fail Meghna. She's crying. Please give her half that mark." Of course, now I feel so good about that because I felt like my entire class was with me. And the teacher, of course, pulled my ears, and then she gave me that half a mark. So I scraped. From that to my 9th grade and my prelims, where I was second highest in class in my scores. So just 3 years made such a big difference. And I feel like, when I pray for my kids or when I wish something well for my kids, I just really wish that they find that one teacher who really inspires them in their lives, that they because every child has the potential. What I realized was that I also had the potential, I just never had found it. And I needed this one teacher who held my hand and helped me through it. So, that
there are a lot of teachers who are attending today's session.
Yes.
There are principals of schools who are attending today's session, and I'm sure all of them resonate every word of what you're saying. Of course, a lot of students also resonate that there is this concept of a charismatic adult that makes or mars your life. I mean, charismatic obviously makes your life, but there's somebody else who can actually mar your life completely.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I don't appreciate the teachers who were there, because I think teachers have such a noble profession to be able to go leave their own kids, take care of other kids. It's amazing. But it's just that to find, every child needs that 1 or 2 teachers who really inspire them. And I was fortunate to have that. So, yeah.
Precisely. Absolutely. So well said. Rahul, we absolutely want to know about your childhood and your school and where did you come from?
So it was very different from Meghna. I had 2 parents. They were both doctors, worked in the hospital or in GP practice. I was in the UK, in Wales, in a small little village outside one of the main cities. We were the only Indian kids in the area for miles and miles and miles. And I had a very happy childhood. I had a very, very happy childhood in the sense that I grew up mostly outside of the house. We were always in streams or in fields or up trees or something or the other, getting into trouble as little boys tend to do. But I saw both my parents work. My mum, when I was growing up, still had to do night shifts. Once or twice a week, she was doing night shifts at the hospital. My father was a surgeon, and I saw them deal with real life. I saw them deal with real life. And we were 3 boys. I have 2 brothers, the 3 of us. My mum would work all day and come home and cook and clean and look after us and all of those things. And I saw a work ethic. I saw a professional work ethic that life isn't given to you on a plate. You have to work damn hard for it. That was something that both my parents inspired, not just me, but both of all of us, all 3 of us, inspired us to always achieve, to try out everything. So, sports or academics or extracurriculars, try out everything and excel, because you know that the world out there is we saw how hard it was for them to balance their work lives with family, and you got an instant understanding of what was going to be needed. I mean, I'm eternally grateful to my parents for the childhood that I had. I had an amazing childhood, that then, when I moved to India when I was about 12 years old, that was my culture shock, coming from where I was born and coming here. I didn't know the language. I couldn't speak the language. India was a very different place back then. I'm talking, 1987, 1988. It was a very different place. And just I think both my parents giving us the strength to adapt to that situation, where, a lot of other kids would have sort of gone into a shell or whined and complained and sort of said, all right, we want to go back, we can't do this, etc., etc. But no, we toughed it out, and it was difficult. I went to an Indian school for 6 months, didn't understand a damn thing of what was going on, really struggled, and eventually found a school, and we worked really hard and we played really hard. We had a great time of it in school, and I knew at that point that if I didn't do very well academically, if I didn't have good extracurriculars, I wasn't going to go to college abroad. I mean, my parents weren't they weren't rich from any stretch of the imagination. And even if you are fairly well off, putting 3 kids through college internationally is no easy feat. So I knew that if I didn't do well, I wasn't going to go abroad to get the education that I wanted. And so, by the time I was about 13 or 14, that was the single-minded sort of focus, that I have to do well, I have to score well, I have to work really hard. And I did work really hard. I worked really hard all my way through school. I worked really hard all my way through college. One of the things that I tell my students now, I think, is that it doesn't matter, what people tell you. Whether people tell you that you're really great at something or people tell you that you're really terrible at something. What matters is what you think, and what matters is how hard you work. And I always tell my students when they ask me, how do I know if I'm working hard enough? And I say, well, the only way for you to know is go and look at yourself in the mirror. If you look at yourself in the mirror, that will tell you whether you're working hard enough, because only you can know. Nobody else knows.
Very well.
And I think, very early in our lives, we learned to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we learned to understand when we were slacking off, and that helped us refocus ourselves. So
absolutely, wow, so inspiring. I think a huge takeaway has been that only we can tell that we are working hard enough or not. I mean, you cannot lie to yourself. I mean, you know so well. And I think super takeaway for students who are listening to this conversation this evening, because I think we oftentimes get into this spot that I know I'm doing it, and we are on a denial mode that I am doing well and I know I'm doing well. So I'm going to come back to a little bit on your challenges, Meghna. I wanted to have a little more detailed understanding of the fact that you spoke about a challenge that you had in math. If you can tell me just what was it that you're saying that teacher did to you that made all the difference? What was that X factor that was different in that teacher that wasn't there in the others? So why that half mark failing to second?
I think Manjushri, I think she believed, I think she believed in each and every one of us. We were 5, 6 of us. I was not alone with her. We were 5, 6 of us. And I think she believed in the capability of each one of us. And that belief in her eyes made us feel confident. And I really cannot pinpoint. I don't know if Teacher Anita is here, and she's on Facebook, but I don't think she's attending this. But huge thanks to her. Her name is Anita Frank, and she really she showed us so much compassion. She never let us feel like we were, we were anything less than what we were. She gave us the confidence, and I think it was just that. I think it's just that she believed in us, that we could do it. And honestly, I don't think she also imagined that I would do so well. But that is what I'm saying. I don't think that we realize the impact that we have on the child.
Yeah. I think one thing that's coming to my mind here is what you mentioned earlier on. Somewhere I think she was also a person who was not biased about the fact that you're a star daughter. Otherwise there's this stamping that happens, where labels can be disabling kind of a thing, where, oh, ये तो बड़े बाप के बच्चे है, ये क्या करेगी, ये तो कुछ करेगी नहीं, उसको तो सब कुछ ready-made.
You're so right. It goes both ways. People think that we get favors, not necessarily. The only people who liked me in my school were my peons, because whenever the film used to release, they used to ask me, ticket deke aana please, huh? I used to get them tickets on the sly. My principal never knew. But those are the only guys who liked me. That also, I was such a shy and introverted kid that I would never take advantage of the fact that they liked me. I would always do say Changu Namaste types and walk off. So I think my upbringing from my parents, I think they were very conscious of the fact that they didn't want me to be spoiled or get into I don't know how to put it nicely, but they wanted me to stay grounded, and I think that they really make that effort to put me in a school that was grounded. They didn't let me get affected by my dad's success as such. I wasn't bought expensive things. I lived a very, with small budgets, which is why when I went to college also, and now my dad still makes fun of me. He says, you're such a kanjoos, even your own money you will spend. But I think it's not that. I think it's just that you feel, because you've been brought up like that, you feel that value.
Value systems.
I really saw my dad work very hard. I mean, everybody did. Rahul did as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my mom and I, there would be months without seeing my dad because he would be on shoot and he would be working. So I feel you value that.
Meghna, I want to ask you from the inside of a girl who was a shy introvert, because this is something that my fraternity, as facilitators, as teachers, as people in the education field, we see such people. And today the world is such that you project yourself all the time. I want to know what was going inside of a person who was shy, who was introvert, and what were the pressures and the pull and the tug that you were getting. If you're saying that you were a shy person, I want to know, what was it living inside a Meghna who was shy, and what were the things that you didn't like that people expected from you possibly? Because that's what happens, right? Shy people are said, kya kitni chup chup rehti hai, baat karna hai, baat nahi karegi to kaise hoga?
So first of all, one of the things that I want to really say to all the children out there is that it's okay to be an introvert. Yeah, I think that the world that we live in puts so much importance and emphasis on being an extrovert that, it's okay. It's your personality. And there are lots of introverts who do brilliantly well in various art, creativity. There are so many things that they can really express their emotion through writing. And I think that the world needs to change their perspective towards kids or personalities that are introverted. I feel that we are the ones who are making these, we're putting these labels really. And I don't think any child should be labeled ever. For me, being introverted was hard because I wasn't able to speak up. Yeah. So I think that the difference was that if you're introverted and you have the courage, then it's okay. But I was actually just real fatu. I don't know how to say it. But I was not able to speak up even to my friends who were my age. Yeah, they would get away with bullying me and I would just be like, keep quiet, then go and cry alone, not able to even tell my parents that what had happened in school. I was that kind of personality for a very long time. So I think that is not healthy. That is not good. I feel like, you need people to talk to. You need to have the confidence to be able to talk to your parents. Our daughter is quite an introvert. She's quite shy with others. With us, she's not, but outside she is. But the one thing that I've told her is that you must share with us. You must not keep things inside you. So I think that, and even though my relationship with my mom was just the most chilled out, we watched the old black and white Hindi movies at end, and it was just me and her. My sister came many, many years later. 23 years later. So it was just me and her, and we had a wonderful relationship. But I think that it was just my own confidence. It's not like that she never was willing to listen to me. It was my own lack of confidence that if I say this, I may hurt her. If I say this, am I even being right? So I think that is what I would tell the children out there, that, it's okay to be an introvert, but please share with those who are close to you. Don't let people walk all over you. That is not.
So did you ever have to go to a counselor?
No, in those days, there were no counselors.
It was not.
It's not a culture.
Back then there was no.
And today, he keeps saying you should go even now. But there's no harm. There's absolutely no harm. And I feel that, but then in those days, there was not that culture.
There was nothing. Rahul, I want to ask you.
I'd like to also say here that you know, one of the things you said about labeling people, I think that's really important. You know, we have this typical idea in our head of what an introvert looks like, but that's not necessarily what an introvert is. I mean, you know, Meghna will tell you, I'm pretty socially introverted as well. But if you looked at me as a child, you know, I was class topper, I was, you know, a sports captain, all of those kinds of things, you know, lots of people around me, all of those kinds of things. But I still see myself as an introvert. I'm not an extroverted person. And I think that we can be very quick, I think, sometimes to label people. When this whole thing of introverted and extroverted, it's very complicated. You know, we can be very introverted in some ways and very extroverted in some ways. People are very complicated. It's not as simple as, you know, they always say, don't judge a book by its cover. And that's absolutely true. You should never judge a book by its cover. And, you know, so, you know, if you look at her childhood and my childhood, and you would be very quick to say, all right, she's the introvert and he's the extrovert. But actually now living together, she's the extrovert, I'm the introvert. That's the way that it is. And I think that, you know, we have to also allow people to be different things, you know, and not try to paint everybody with this one color brush, which I think we are so quick to do in our society today. And I think that, you know, that's one of the things that needs to change.
Awesome. Awesome. I think I'm getting so many words of wisdom from this entire conversation. Every one of them is like a quotable quote that I can actually, you know, keep repeating year on year. If I had to ask you, if I'm going to close my chapter on school, and if I had to ask you the one big thing that you take away from your own schooling years, one big thing that school taught you, which on hindsight, you know, when you connect the dots, when you look back, you see, school was where I learned this. School was what I actually miss now for this reason. So what would that be? What would your school memory be?
So my school, you know, of course it came from my parents, but I think it just reiterated my sense of ethics, my sense of right and wrong. Yeah. And I think that my school was very, very firm about that. And I feel like that is something that I really learned from school. You know, and I know there are all schools do that, but for me that was my biggest takeaway. That, you know, it taught me really taught me how to be a good human being. You know, how to be a human being who helps people. In fact, you know, everyone academics, everyone used to get math award, science award, geography award. Every year I would get helpful and cooperative. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. But, you know, my mom didn't see it like that. After the third year, she like, many are in sub science, biology, and it was like that consolation award. But you know what? Really, I mean, I was so happy when I finished my school in the 10th standard. I got a 100 rupee scholarship for being helpful and cooperative. So I take so much pride in that. I feel that, you know what? Who remembers biology and science? But just the fact that you can be a good person, help people in your class, even if you don't have that, you know, intelligence of doing well in exams. So I think that's what I took back from my school. It really encouraged me for being the person I was.
And I think that 100 rupees is worth 1 crore of rupees today, Meghna. I can vouch for you. And I want to tell this to all of you, my dear friends who are watching this today. Meghna is my go-to person. I have to pick up the call and ask Meghna for help. And trust me, there is nothing that she has refused me to date. So that's why I don't go too much to her, because I know usko main kuch bhi mangungi, so she's like, man, Bhagwan ji, mujhe ye de do, and I get it. So thank you, Meghna. You've really been my go-to person. Just a couple of days ago, I asked her, and
that's school. That school, my school taught me that.
Yeah. Your school award.
Never to say no.
Yes, and very much. And I'll say that not just for you, but for your entire team. I mean, look here, I just said, will Rahul be part of it? And here, Rahul is also part of this lovely evening. And even your team, they're all so helpful. They're so supportive. So I think that 100 rupees award is now worth 10 crores, 100 crores, not 100 rupees. So it's really true. Rahul, what's your takeaway from school? I actually want to just go back quickly and ask you, you said you did all the kind of naughty things in school. Thoda batao na. Please tell us what naughty things did you do in school.
We have to see some imperfections also, yeah.
We want to Let's get the pep into this talk now.
No, I mean, look, as I said, I did all of the things that little boys do, got into fights, got into trouble, all of those things. I mean, I was no saint.
You are a normal. You are a normal child.
And that's, yeah, absolutely, and that's that's important as well. I think you learn from those things. You learn from the mistakes
Yes.
that you make, and I think that's really important as well. And the thing that I would take away from school is an inner drive, right? That's what I took from my school, and a sense of inner drive. Look, I had good teachers. It's not that I didn't have good teachers. I had good teachers. I had good friends around me. I had my mum and my dad who were very supportive in everything that I did. But I learned from school that, whatever you wanted to achieve had to come from you. You had to do. Your teachers, they can see the potential, they can push, they can give you belief, but you don't do well on belief alone. You have to work hard. And that is what I took away from my school. I took away from that whatever I wanted to achieve in life, that was on me. That wasn't on anybody else. That wasn't ever going to be lumbered on anybody else's shoulders. It was not going to be anybody else's fault if I did badly, or if I didn't manage to do what I wanted to do. That wasn't going to be on anybody else's shoulders. That was all me. And I think that is what has held me in really good stead ever since. So from school, that's what I take.
Wow. I think that's something that we also tell our children so often, that it's not about blaming, it's about taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Being responsible for yourself, for your failures, for your successes, all part and parcel of your growing up. And Rahul, you said this, you couldn't have said it at a more opportune time right now, because today, when we are all sitting at home and doing online classes, you're actually missing those little crazy things that happen in class, your fights, your arguments. Ma'am, isko bolo na, ma'am, you took my eraser. Those are those growing up, the fights, the brawls, the maramari that happens. Kids are missing that, and I feel so bad that they are. I mean, because the online platform just doesn't add up. It just doesn't give you the same effect.
Absolutely.
So I'm now going to move on to a very interesting part that everybody is going to love to listen to. Your love story.
He's already red.
He's taken a bottle of water. Oh my God, he's getting nervous. Okay, you go. You're the extrovert.
So we met.
I want to hear that part of all those pictures on the wall. That part. I heard it in that interview, and that was too funny.
So we met in college. It was actually the first day, and we were just trying to figure out our classrooms, and it's amazing how it worked out, because his first choice was LSE actually, but it just so happened that he didn't get the grade that he needed for LSE, and he came to King's, and I did exceptionally well to get into King's. No, I didn't. It was just that it was a new program, so they let me in. So how the universe works, and marriages are made in heaven and all that. So I think that it just made that happen. But the amazing part about our love story is that we didn't get along at all in the beginning. We couldn't stand each other. I mean, I used to go to my friends and say, can I please have a paracetamol or a Crocin because I have a headache? This guy is driving me nuts. I know. Even I don't believe it, because I remember those moments very clearly, but we just didn't get along. He was from Delhi, I was from Bombay. He would irritate me with the Delhi banter, and I used to be like, no, Bombay, there's Bombay. Very childish, I know, but we were like that. And we just did not get along. So in fact, when we started dating, it was like our friends had bets. How long will they last? 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, like that. And we like outlasted all of them. So I think that one thing that we did, we were very different as personalities. We grew up in very different backgrounds. So I feel like it was also something that kept us going. But
you didn't know who you are.
No. So that was in the beginning, and like this was in the first 1 week or 10 days. He had no idea who I was, and they were actually looking. one of their family friends had said that Subhash Ghai's daughter is in your class. So, you know, she's a family friend of mine. So just connect with her so then we can go out for dinner. But because the way I was, I think just so like jolly in the way I dressed and whatever, they couldn't imagine that I was her. So they're talking to me, but they didn't realize that I was my dad's daughter. And so we, you know, we had our little dorm rooms and my best friend and I was sharing, and we were going out, and then they just came to say, let's go. All the friends came in, and the first time they saw our dorm room. Now I had this lovely picture wall where I had all my family photos, and then I had this big poster of Tom Cruise because he was my, you know, hero. And then I had also a photo of Amir Khan, right, with me, and he was also my heartthrob. So I had one photo of Amir Khan and me. And he came in, he looked at my wall, and he goes, "Why do you have a photo of Subhash Ghai on your wall?" So I mean, it was like, yeah, I'm a fan. I really wanted to say that. I'm a big fan. Tom Cruise, Amir Khan, and Subhash Ghai, only three. But I had to then, like, I think my friend or somebody said, listen, she's his daughter, he's her father. And then, yeah, he was quite embarrassed by that. Because he had no
So did he
idea.
say, this Jalli is his daughter? No, he couldn't say that. I think he had already
Assuming
started
that's
falling
what
in
he
love with
felt. I'm assuming that's what he felt. But yeah, so that was a quite funny incident.
Wow, wow.
We just managed, you know, and I think that one of the things that we both decided was that we would, and it was his idea. I thought was quite like immature, I feel, now that I think about it. He's always been a Buddha. So he's always had this very, you know, strong sense of self and strong sense of what is the right thing to do. So he said that no matter what, we're not going to break up and get back together. Once you break up, then that's it. And we were seeing all our friends breaking up, getting back together, breaking up. And we would have massive fights, but we never mentioned splitting up. We would make up and go ahead, you know. So I think that really helped. And I feel like today's generation is such a common thing, you know. You just break up, and it's become quite casual in that sense, right?
Yes.
So in that, I don't know, it's somehow we just stuck, and I think that relationship, those fights, just made us get to know each other so much better that you know, now we're quite zen.
Yeah. Rahul, I have a question for you. What is it being a Ghai Jamai? How was it for you?
You know, it's very strange because like I said, I mean, I don't come from the background where you know, neither of my parents were particularly enamored by this industry or anything like that. You know, they were sort of very white collar, professional, you know, and you know, for me, the idea of you know, becoming the son-in-law of the Ghai family, I mean, it didn't really matter to me. I mean, that wasn't you know, what was important, I think, for me was that I had a good relationship with my in-laws, that you know, they saw me as a source of strength for them, that I was adding to their family like Meghna had added to my family, and things like that. And you know, I honestly, you know, Meghna's given you her background. You know, her father is you know, larger than life, and
Yes.
those kinds of things. But you know, the rest of the family is frankly not. I mean, you know, her mum is lovely and you know, as down to earth as you possibly can find. So you know, it was never something that was an issue. I mean, you know, when my mom came and my brothers came to meet them, you know, they behaved like a traditional Punjabi, you know, ladki wale, you know, there, and you know, all of that happened, and you know, so it was, you know, my father-in-law, for all his sort of magnanimity and gregarious nature that he has, he's a very traditional Punjabi man. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, that's where his heart is.
Yes.
And he's a very big-hearted man, and you know, he's
Yes.
accepted me, my family, you know, no questions asked. You know, and I think that you know, I'm ever so grateful
Absolutely.
for how they've taken me in, because as fate would have it, you know, rather than her being in my turf, I've ended up on her turf. And without her family around, I don't think it would have been as smooth a ride for us as it has been, for sure.
Absolutely. And I completely second the fact that, Subhash Ghai sir is one of the most humble person, because I remember my fan moment when I was doing these sessions at Whistling Woods, and after about 2-3 rounds of those sessions, because I was coming consecutively for 2-3 years. The initial 1 or 2 years, I wasn't able to meet up with him. And then the third time, he said, no, I must meet Manjushri, because I've heard from my faculty that her sessions were interesting. And so we must. So I went and I walked into his cabinet. It was that huge one at Whistling Woods upstairs. And Meghna, I was like, oh my God, he got up from his chair and he came walking towards me. I'm a nobody, an absolute nobody. But a person of his stature gets up and says, hello, Manjushri. And by then, trust me, he had read about Atman Academy on the website. He said, I know you're doing this school and you're doing a very good job. So tell me more about it. I was so humbled. I said, my goodness, you're talking to the biggest, dream weaver in this world. And here he is just coming out and saying things. So I can totally second that.
Yeah, I want to add to that, for the kids today, it's so important. And even for the teachers who are teaching these kids, it's so important to know that life struggles shape us as a human being, and I think it's all the struggles that he went through, all the doors that were slammed on his face when he was struggling, all the people who did not give him the respect, just because he was a newcomer. I think that taught him that lesson of always being down to earth, being humble. And that's what he's taught us, and Rahul and I really career-wise grew together, because even though he was in investment banking, I was doing international distribution for Yade in London. So he was my driver. He was driving me everywhere. Actually, I used to drive. He used to be my navigator. Yeah, he used to be, because I was very bad at directions. So when we used to take the film reels and deliver it from theater to theater, he was coming with me. So I was discussing film business with him. So as I was learning, he was learning. And which is why I think we made such a good team at Whistling Woods, because we already had that experience of working together. And and I hear so many stories of couples working together and how it can go really wrong. But touch wood, I think, barring a few big, shout out moments amongst ourselves, we've not really had that. And I think it's quite amazing that we have that understanding. And I think that comes from respect. That comes from mutual respect. So through the relationship, he had a lot of respect for me, and I had a lot of respect for him. And I think in any relationship, if it's based on respect, you make sure that you try to, first of all, always make it work till the end,
Absolutely. And that is completely visible in the way you work. I mean, there is a certain flow with the work that you both do at Whistling Woods. And I was listening to one of your earlier interviews, and there's something about Whistling Woods, and I can't agree with that more, because it is an organization with a soul. You walk into that space, and I know my colleague Shraddha is here. She will also second that. There's just something about it. I don't know what it is, but there's a certain sense of calm. So I'm going to now come to one of my final sections in today's session about Whistling Woods, because I want to also speak about the Zen philosophy that both of you, without probably even realizing it, are bringing into your organization. Before I do that, may I request Mehak to please play the video so that we all get to see a little bit about Whistling Woods. And then I'm going to come and ask you some questions about, your amazing work on the campus. Thank you, Mehak.
Yeah, I'm just playing the video.
I remember when I was making films, a lot of young boys and girls used to come to my office to ask for work. That time there was no school in Mumbai. I thought of an idea to open a film institute in all aspects of cinema and media. I'm glad that I could fulfill my dream of having this international film institute like Whistling Woods International in Mumbai.
Whistling Woods and the efforts and endeavors taken by Subhash Ghai and his family have truly been exceptionally fulfilled.
The access that Whistling Woods has to the community of creators
is what is really amazing.
Our students today, they understand what is happening in the industry, and at the same time, they know what is that field that they would like to create a nation.
An animation program associated with a film school gives the students a good advantage of learning about film production methodologies.
The kind of good students they are producing, the kind of courses they have, augurs really well for not just the film industry, but in various other industries.
Whistling Woods has actually so many different departments. I didn't realize until I came here. Visual effects, VR, and stuff that actually I would like to come and learn as well.
Over here, along with various elements of film, you are able to connect music also. I think it's a great endeavor to know that a facility like this exists in India. It's a matter of pride for all of us.
Within 12 years, to have selected itself, that Whistling Woods is up there with the very, very best.
Well, probably the most preeminent educational institution in this country. It is this institute that has put you on the pedestal.
I'm delighted by the fact that Whistling Woods as an institution has concentrated its energies, its resources in building the future generation of our cinema.
Wow, so amazing. And I'm so glad we could get to see this film. This, for all of you who'd like to see it, I think this is again, it is available on YouTube. So you might want to have a look at it once again. But mind blowing, the amount of work that has happened. So Whistling Woods is now how many years old? It's
14 years.
14. 14 years.
So, you know, Whistling Woods, I think what you mentioned, Manjushri, that why you get that vibe, why you get that energy. And I think it's because the intent that it was started with was so pure and full of compassion and passion. You know, it was a dream of my dad's. And, you know, it was when he was struggling. It was back then. When he was struggling is when, you know, he felt that why isn't there a place for somebody like me who doesn't have anybody in the industry to support them. So he felt that there was, and he made that promise to himself back then, that, you know, if I ever make anything of myself, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a platform for young talent who come to Mumbai looking for jobs in the Indian film industry. So I think that you know, that determination that he had back then, and then to follow it through after so many years. So it was after Tal when, you know, we went for a public issue, and he said he went out there, and when he was, you know, doing his speech to the shareholders, he said, I am doing this because I want to build a film school, you know, and I will do other things with that money, but I'm taking this money of yours to build a school. So that commitment was very firm, and the intent. So, you know, when he called me back, honestly, I was in no mood to come back. I was very happy. I was with Rahul, and I didn't want to come back to India. I was working there and enjoying my independence. So I really resisted it as well, to be honest. But it was my dad's wisdom at that point where he said, I want you, you're so young. And there are going to be so many people who are going to have 20, 30 more years of experience than you. So it's very important that you're there right from the start, because I want you to be at the helm of this institute. Now, to trust a 21-year-old who really, even till then, I was quite underconfident and I wasn't really the person that I am today. I give him a lot of credit that, he did that. And also wisdom in the sense that he had that wisdom to get me here early. So I was the first person, and that I think made a huge difference to me, because then Whistling Woods became my baby, and it was something that I was helping build right from the time that we had sketches on paper about what classrooms would look like and what, and then we traveled all over the world to research various schools, and even in India to find out how schools are run, because we were not educators. We had no idea. So we had to go and do a lot of that research and then put it all together. So there was a lot of years and years of hard work that went in, and a lot of heart and soul. Even each person that came on board, in terms of our founding faculty, they were all personally invited by my father to his home, asked personally that, will you help me with this? This is something I want to do. And it wasn't an easy task, because a lot of people's loyalties with the FTII, they weren't sure how this would play up in that. And he assured them, he said, see, FTI is my alma mater. I would never do something to kind of go against it. I want to build it with them. I want to help them as well. But we need something in Mumbai. We can't just keep going back to Pune. So, he really had that. And for a person of that stature to really go down to each and every person that he wanted to hire, even the marketing person's interview he was involved in. So he really looked at every little thing. And I think that shows, and of course that passion of his to build the school, got kind of handed over to us. And that is why we are so careful about the quality, because for us, it's his name. It's his dream, and we cannot let anything happen, which will affect that. So for us, we have to, it's something that is his, and we have to protect it with all our might.
Yeah. Rahul, you are heading academics. Question, because today as an organization and even at a personal level, we're championing the cause of inclusion. So will you be able to share with us some, what are the inclusive practices, or what makes Whistling Woods an inclusive school?
Well, I think we do lots of things to try and build inclusivity. One of the things that I'm most proud of is the number of girls that are in Whistling Woods, where in fact I think we're majority girls now on the campus, which is really heartening. And obviously, I mean, it's probably skewed now because we have a fashion school, and the majority of the girls are there. But even the filmmaking course, I mean, which is something that is particularly male dominated, we have seen over the years that has gone from about 20% girls now to about 40% girls, which is an impressive thing in itself. And typically the girls used to sort of deviate towards direction or editing or things like that. But what's really heartening is now they're going towards producing and cinematography, where there is a lot of it's a very male-centric career, and lots of girls are going towards that. The other thing that I'm really proud of the fact is that we've been approached many times by parents with students which have disabilities. We had a girl who came in to do her MBA who was partially sighted. We've had kids in with various disabilities, learning difficulties, all of those kinds of things, and we've never said no. We've never said no. We've never said no, we won't take them. We've always said that we will do everything that we can to try to get them to have a normal college experience, and that's really key, because I'm very upfront with parents. I'm very upfront with my students. I don't mince my words. I'm very transparent, and I wanted to tell them all that, look, we're not a special school. That's not who we are. We don't have that capability here. But My faculty is willing to go that extra mile. They're willing to put in that extra hard work and really work with a kid who themselves wants to work, regardless. And that's for people who have disabilities or people who don't have disabilities. That way, I think the school doesn't see differences. We don't see any differences with our students. We don't see any differences with how they come to us. My focus, and I always tell this to students, is that, I'm basically there to make sure that they have a great college experience, because that's what we are. And that's what we are now for the majority of our students. We are that sort of final tertiary education that they're going to get. And you really want them to have that great experience. And that is obviously a great education, which is obviously what parents are most happy about. But for the students themselves, we do understand that there's more to college than just going to class and getting grades. This is where you learn to be the person that you want to be. This is where you grow up. This is where you take responsibility. This is where you meet friends. This is where you learn to socialize. This is where you learn to say yes. This is where you learn to say no. This is all of that, right? And Whistling Woods is there to try to make sure that kids learn all of that in the time that they are with us. And whether a kid is, male or female, whether they're, transgender, whether they're, whatever their preferences are in life, whether they've got disabilities or no disabilities, whether they've got learning difficulties or no learning difficulties, if they are willing to come in and accept that, then we are with them every step of the way.
Nice. That's so amazing to hear. And that's, I think it's very, it's wonderful that you said that, because a lot of parents who are listening to this can obviously aspire to get their kids to Whistling Woods. And I'm going to now go to my absolutely final section. I said leadership was my final section, but no, actually I forgot that I have parenting as my final section, which I want to definitely ask you just one simple question. Can parents really be Zen? Is it possible to be Zen all the time? Can you actually stay Zen, be Zen? Are you both Zen parents?
What definition of Zen? My definition, yes, I am courageous every moment when I'm dealing with my children. There's a lot of courage required to be calm.
So even what he says, focus, balance, all of that, does it happen all the time? I mean, for all of us who are also teachers, also principals, also...
No, absolutely not. We're all human beings. And I think that it comes with experiences, with learning, it comes with time, but I feel like, we must at least aspire. Yeah, we must at least aspire to bring up our children in a way that they really remember. They have good memories of their childhood. They remember that their childhood was not just about academics and scoring well. Their childhood was about many more things. And sometimes I doubt myself, because both of us are so chilled out when it comes to academics, that I feel like maybe we're not doing enough. But at the same time, when I see my kids happy and, and they're smart kids, they're intelligent, they're confident, I feel, it's okay, they'll shape up fine. I mean, I was not great at academics, and I'm doing okay for myself, I think. So I think that it's more about the personalities that they develop in these years. So it's very natural for us parents to get upset, for us parents to lose it, especially with academic pressure coming in. And online education has not been easy, not for parents, not for teachers, not for children. And I talk to so many moms who are really, really struggling with it, because kids don't listen to their parents. I mean, the kind of appreciation that parents have had for teachers in this lockdown is amazing, because we're like, aap mahan ho, you manage our children so well. But it's just psychology. Kids just won't listen to us. And when our kids' classes were going on and the teacher would come online, my son's demeanor would change completely. So I felt like, wow, I wish I had that magic wand with him. But I think that's what we are. We are parents, you are teachers, and we all play our own roles, right? Absolutely. So I think it's important for us to just go back. And I think as a parent, what I've learned is never be shy to apologize to your children. Yeah, if you've been wrong, go ahead. Don't have an ego with your children. Go ahead, go tell them, I'm sorry, I lost my temper on you. I shouldn't have. I think that that is one thing that has really helped me build my relationship with my children. Be honest with them. Yeah, share with them the troubles that you go through. I think it's important for them to know that you're working hard and not protect them from what you're going through. Let them see it. Let them share that struggle. Let them see that, yes, mom and dad are. I mean, when the Whistling Woods case was going on, I remember my kids were as much, and they were very young at that point. They didn't even understand, but I have this video of my 4-year-old son saying, why do they want to take away our Whistling Woods? It's such a special place and we love it. And why do, so they were so involved in it. And when we finally had that victory in the court, they were so excited about it. And they've seen that. They've seen our struggles and we have not ever hidden that from them. And I think one of the things that parents these days make the mistake of is that because of the guilt they have for the fact that they are both working, they're not able to spend enough time with them, we give our children everything. Yeah, everything. We want to protect them. And I think that we're not doing them a favor by doing that. They need to fall. They need to learn how to get up again. They need to face failures. And maybe that means tears at that moment and giving you, all this banter about you don't love me and you don't, that's okay. They'll always love you. It's actually we're building strong individuals for the future. And, I keep saying this and I don't know how much flack I'll get for this, but this pandemic, this lockdown has really, I feel, has been a boon for these children who were taking things for granted. My son would complain about school. He goes to a lovely school. He said, I want to go to school when a holiday is starting, can't wait for the weekend. And now he appreciates school so much that I would go to school any day, Yeah. So I think that it's made them more grateful for what they're missing out on. Somewhere we have to count our blessings for everything that we have.
Absolutely. Lovely. So we're now going to just end with small things. A couple of audience questions that were posted earlier, not today, because we had in our form invited them. So I don't know whether the people who have sent these questions are here today or not. I guess I hope they're here. But a question that has been asked by a friend of mine who's also principal of a very well-known school here in Mumbai, Suma Das. She has asked the question, how do you keep students motivated? So given that you are working with higher education, what lets you keep kids motivated? Maybe Rahul, you can go first if you're working so closely.
I think what's really important to keep students motivated is first you have to know your students. You have to know who they are. One of the things people always tell me is, how do you know all your students? And I do. We've had well over 2,500, 3,000 students through Whistling Woods in the last 14 years, and I honestly know most of them. I know most of them by name, and that's because you make the effort to get to know the students. Then you'll know what motivates them. And it's different for younger kids and it's different for older kids. But I teach older kids. And they have their own problems with motivation. But the only way to find out is to sit them down and talk to them and find out, what is it? What is it that you want to do? How can we help you? And that's the other thing I think that sometimes teachers is they're reluctant sometimes to be flexible. Not all students learn the same way. Not all students think the same way, And sometimes when you have students who are unmotivated, chances are it's because they're lacking a little bit of confidence. They're lacking a little bit of confidence in themselves. Perhaps they don't like the work that they're doing. Perhaps they don't like the way that it's being taught. Find them something else to do. Find them something that will give them joy. Find them something that will give them happiness. Find them something that will give them confidence. And I always take it on myself to sit down with a kid that I think should be doing better and they're underachieving in class for whatever reason. And I will sit them down and I'll say, all right, well look, if you're bored in class, you don't like this particular subject, or you don't like, or you've learned it before, it's something that you already know, etc., etc. What can we do else? What more can we do? How else can we get you gainfully, looking at what it is that you want to do? So I think the most important thing is to try to get to know your students. That helps you with motivation all the time.
I think the tagline in your business says it all. Do what you love. Yeah, that's
Absolutely,
it.
absolutely.
That,
You know,
that
that's
gives you the entire motivation. Lifelong motivation. If you're doing what you love, then you don't need to love what you're doing. You are doing it already. So there's no special effort.
you know, we take it for granted sometimes that students are supposed to love everything. Yeah, you know, the maths and physics and chemistry and history and geography, but not all kids love all those things. So you have to find them something that they enjoy doing to offset what they're doing elsewhere. I mean, that's just logical. It's just common sense. You know, that listen, if you strive a little bit harder in history class, you know, we can do that stuff in where you like, and I think that's so important so that, you know, so that students know that they work hard at something, and yeah, then I'll get to, oh good, then I'll get to sort of go and direct that, or go and, you know, work with that equipment, or go and take those photos, which I really love doing, and you know, that's fine.
Wow. How do you define success? Money, fame, good life, or anything else? That's another question that has been asked by Rajshri. So how will you define success?
Happiness.
Then,
I think that's it. I think just that if you can educate children and teach them how to be happy in no matter what situation they are in, that building that fortitude of a personality in them, to letting them know that you can be happy wherever you are. You don't need to go somewhere else looking for happiness. That is successful for me. Yeah.
and I'm going to end today finally, but this is the fun part of it. We have 10 very fun questions today. Okay, quick answers. All right.
Rapid
Okay,
fire.
are you ready? Ready? Okay. If you were to become one of your teachers tomorrow morning, which would it be? Each one of you has to answer.
If I had to become one of my teachers,
Yeah, your teacher when you were in school. So tomorrow morning you suddenly become her or him. Who would it be?
My English teacher. My English
Okay.
teacher.
Why?
Because nobody messed with her. She was nobody messed with her. My English
All right.
teacher.
Got it. You nailed it. Meghna, who would it be for you?
I think I would be my PE teacher, my PT teacher. Because she really tortured me as a kid. I was such a lazy kid in sports. So I feel like if I'm her, then maybe I can understand why she was torturing me and why she was me to.
Oh my God. I thought you'd be your math teacher. I thought you'd already given an answer.
No,
for
that
this
is my
question, but-
expectation. I can never dream to be like her. It's
All right. Okay, if you were a school teacher, okay, that was like music. But if supposing, as a career, both of you were school teachers, which subject do you think you would be teaching?
Which subject would you take?
Which subject?
Oh, I teach maths.
Math. Okay. Okay, I'm hiring you.
So, you know, when I did the IB, I did the IB in the UK, and we had a subject called TOK, Theory of Knowledge.
Theory of
It
Knowledge.
was my favorite when I was there. And now that I'm more and more into philosophy and spiritualism, I would love to do TOK as a subject.
There you go. All right. Which of your dad's films would you have liked to be a leading lady in?
I would have liked to be what?
Leading lady.
Oh my
a leading lady that you were in dad's film.
Which film has no dances in it? That's the one I would be in. The actress that doesn't dance.
Highly unlikely. Dad's most films had lovely dances.
Yeah, see, Rahul said Pardes. I think it's because my dad, when he wrote Pardes, I was studying abroad, you know, and I think a lot of the moments there, you know, the phone calls to the parents when she cries but doesn't let them know, I think a lot of them were inspired by me being away from them. So
and that's the thing about that. In any case, you know, all the Ilu stories also are all about real life episodes from his life that he got into. He's been inspired. Okay, I'm gonna ask you the next question. Which movie would both of you like to be starred as the hero and the heroine, the lead star cast?
My dad's.
Not any movie. Any movie.
My dad's, I thought of hero.
Mr. and Mrs. 55.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Oh,
that's my favorite.
Mr. and
Yeah.
Mrs. 55.
Yeah, it's a black and white film for all the kids out there who don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. But that was a lovely movie.
Yeah.
Super. If you were starred in a movie, then who would you choose as your leading hero and then who would he choose as his leading hero?
Oh,
So your dream hero and your dream hero that you'd like to work with.
as an actor,
So I was just hypothesizing.
does it have to be an opposite sex, or can I like just do a co-actor?
So if you are a heroine, then आपका hero कौन होगा? That's what
Yeah,
I'm asking.
but मेरा heroine भी हो सकती है.
अच्छा जी, हाँ okay, sorry, I take back my words. Anybody, चल जाएगा.
I have this amazing admiration for a Hollywood actress called Meryl Streep. Okay, like it's my
Yes.
dream to meet her. Meryl Streep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's going to be your co-star.
So yeah,
Wow.
I mean, who will be my co-star?
Co-star. Super, super. And who would it be for you, Rahul?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to be in a movie and I was to act, I don't know. I think
He needs a big star.
But if you're talking Hindi cinema, then I mean, I would have loved to have acted opposite Sridevi. I thought she was wonderful. She really was.
Yeah.
She was
Lovely.
absolutely wonderful.
Lovely, lovely. What an amazing story that would be, you know, Rahul Puri and Sridevi.
Rahul and Sridevi.
Okay. The next one I want to go to.
Sorry, your voice is not very clear, Manjushri.
I said, who is messier from the two of you? Between the two of you?
Oh.
I am not messy, but he is over like particular. He's a Virgo, so he's over particular. You know, so I'm not messy, but for his standards, because he has this OCD.
I mean,
I
I have to say that she's come into my study table and rearranged everything, and right now it's just
he's going
driving me.
to, like,
It's driving
fix
me
it
crazy.
after.
Yes. Yes, I know. We saw that Zen moment just before we went live.
So I have that OCD.
Okay. Would you rather have a strict teacher and learn a lot, or would you have a really nice teacher and not learn much?
Strict teacher and learn a lot.
I think
And what about, yeah, strict teacher and learn a lot? Okay. Okay. What is one of the most useless talents that you have? Each one of you has to tell me about your own talent. It's a useless talent.
I don't think any talent can be useless. That's not nice.
I don't think.
Yeah.
For me, it's not useless. I don't think it's useless. But my wife seems to think it's very useless, which is that I have a pretty much of a photographic memory and I remember pretty much everything. And she just thinks that I remember lots of useless information.
My son has inherited it from him. So I get both of them sharing things which are like so, I'm like, please use that brain space for.
And what about you? What would your useless talent be? I mean, just a joke.
What would it be, Rahul? Help me.
That doesn't really help.
Is shopping a talent?
Yes, that's a useless talent.
I think Rahul is definitely going to second that.
I'm very talented at a shop.
And she is extremely talented at it.
I could be a personal shopper for you anytime.
Kya baat hai. And one final question here. Which would be the one place that you would never go for your honeymoon?
Bombay?
Never.
Yes, we live here, so we wouldn't go here.
Yes, got it. Lovely. What an amazing evening. I mean, there's just so much to talk. I know there are so many questions. We can go on till midnight, I think, because you both are such
amazing.
amazing.
Thank you, Manjushri, for having us.
Thank you so much.
Really
Yeah, it's been lovely.
Thank you. And
also.
Yeah, and a parting shot from both of you. Maybe anything, and like something that you're going to sing or you're going to read something to us. Rahul, do you sing?
Oh, no, I do not sing.
Okay.
I do not sing.
So, Meghna, would you like to share something with us?
So I just want to end on an inspiring note, and it's a story of Buddha that really changed the way I dealt with people who were angry, who were toxic. Nowadays, this word is very fashionable. Who were bringing negativity in my life. So it's important to know how to deal with these people, because you will face and you will come across a lot of people like that. Who will bring a lot of negativity in your life. So there was a lovely story about the Buddha, and I shared it with my children, and I want to share it with everybody. That one day Buddha was just walking down the village, and he was zen, as always. And, there came a guy and he said, he started shouting at him and getting really angry at him and saying horrible things to him and saying, what are you doing? You're spreading this Buddhism and it's not right. And what do you think you are? And Buddha had this smile on his face and he was very zen and very calm. And this guy started getting even more angry. And he said, why are you so calm? I'm giving you all this, negativity. I'm telling you that you're a horrible person and you're not reacting to me. And Buddha turned around and said that if you were to buy a gift for someone and that person wouldn't accept that gift, who would that gift belong to? The man immediately said, me. I got it. It's mine. Yeah. So he said, it's the same with anger. If you shout at me and I don't take it, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you. And that really resonated with me. I felt that all the negativity that any person in our life is trying to give us, if you don't take it, it's not going to affect us. So that is the level of Zen that we all need to try and get to, where we don't let anybody else affect our happiness.
Wow.
So that is the story that is dear to my heart and I wanted to share with all of you.
Thank you. I have nothing more to say. You have just, you've given me a Zen moment. Thank you so much to both of you,
Thank you so much.
Meghna and Rahul, for having this lovely conversation. And you have just created a beautiful memory for all of us as we have started our journey of the 10th year with the two of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Congratulations.
looking forward to
Congratulations again. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.